Good evening to all. In fact, when Gopal Srinivasan asked me to share my thoughts this evening with you, and Bala and Suresh came, though I had my difficulties in plugging this program, when Bala told me people are coming from outside the city, from Coimbatore, from Tirupur, from Tiruchendur, that's what attracted me to be present here. You know, in the course of my advisory to leading corporates, the biggest problem I found, the complex mindset that we live a Western exterior and an Indian interior. This is where the conflict arose. It's a cultural mismatch, possibly because of our colonial background. And we know practically nothing about this country. I'll just start with an example of an event which I happened to participate in IIT Bombay sometime in November or December 2010. The program was called Avenue Citizen YouTube. You may have access to it because it's a very, very important program. So regarded in IIT. Ahead of me, Mr. Adi Gardner spoke. And very well prepared speech, very profound thoughts, backed by enormous amount of statistical evidence. And the thrust of the speech was that we were a great civilization, we had great achievements in every field other than economics. And this is the area where we failed badly, and only because of the fortunes of globalization that we began rising. And he also spoke about what Dharma Krishna said in 1978, that we could not grow because it was Hindu rate of growth. And unless we could overcome that impediment of being civilizationally what we are, we could never be regarded as a success. We can never become a success. You know, young minds, many research scholars, academics in that institution, they gave a standing ovation to them. I had gone to speak something else, but I completely changed. Because this speech, in spite of being studied with statistics, evidence, betrayed total ignorance of the recent developments about how the West has begun perceiving India. Not this India, India of 2000 years ago. You know, in 1970, when Japan began rising as a big economic power, the West was surprised. How could an Asian nation develop? So that set off a research by one Paul Biro, a Belgian economist. And he came out with an astounding finding that in the year 1750, Asia had a much better standard of living than Europe. Because China's share of GDP was 33%, India's share of GDP was 24.5%, and that of Britain 1.8%, and that of America 0.1%. And he said it is only subsequently, in the next 150 years, India crashed to 1.8%, and China 6%, and America and England grew to 48%. When he made this research public in the year 1983, there was a huge debate in Europe whether Europe developed because of some inherent capacity, competence, technology, or financial superiority, or its banking system, or did it develop only because of the political mastery it acquired over the rest of the world. This became an acute debate, and many sociologists began saying that if what Paul Biro says is true, we got advantage because of the colonial mastery we had over the rest of the world, and so the OECD countries constituted research under the caption Development Studies Institute and put Angus Madison, one of the most well-known economic historians, to study this, gave him a lot of support. Angus Madison put his thoughts that if what Paul Biro says is true, which I don't believe, it is true. If he says it is true, then West did not have any inherent advantage, it had only the military advantage. You know, in the year 2001, Angus Madison came out with a study, not about 1750, he came out with a study of the 2 millennia of the economic history of the world. From first year of AD, that is Common Era, to 2008. He also forecast what would happen in 2008. And he gave the astounding finding that till the 15th century, India was the leading economic power in the world, with GDP ranging between 34% to 28% in this period, and China was number 2. And China overtook India in 1600. India again overtook China in 1700. Both were overtaken by other countries in 1900. And this is regarding, you can go and see the OECD website, this is regarded as the most authentic economic history of the world. When I mentioned this to the IIT students, the scholars, the researchers, I have spoken in IIM. No one has any clue about this. That we are a performing economy, we are a performing culture. It is not that just Angus Madison said this. You look into Marco Polo studies. He says the Indian commercial ships were several times larger than the Greek ships, and it required 300 crews to operate. And you know, at the time of Akbar, we had 40,000 merchant vessels flying around India. And at the time the British came into India in 1850, we had 34,000 ships. And when the British left India, we had 1,300 ships. And the British banned the construction of ships in Hooghly River. And they prevented our ships from carrying goods to England and from England. And I mentioned all this. And I also mentioned the 2nd century AD record of the Roman Emperor saying, Roman Emperor representative in Egypt saying that India has continuously a trade surplus with Roman Egypt, and if it continues, Roman Egypt will become insolvent, and the surplus, if it is turned into today's value, it is $172 million. See, all these are published records which is available, but your educational institutions, however high and mighty they are, they don't educate Indians about India. So unless you have pride about your civilization, your culture, your tradition, you can never have pride about family. Because family is not an issue in the West. And West is an issue in our mind. And family is a very difficult proposition in the West, in the sense, in the last 30-40 years, the families have collapsed. Today, marriage outside the wedlock in America is 41% of the babies born. And 50% of the families are single parent families. Only 28% of the families where husband and wife live together with children. And so it's over. For example, Scandinavian countries may not exist, which are #1 countries in Human Development Index today. After 50 years, they may not exist at all, because they are not replacing the dead by the born. So we must understand what kind of world we are looking to as vision, as example, as illustration, as the direction towards which we have to go. So I found the tremendous amount of ignorance. And when I explained all this to IIT students, they had no idea about all this. And afterwards, of course, I don't want to go through the entire facts which I placed before them. And afterwards, the students, the professors, the IIT academics came to me and said, "You don't stop with this lecture, you please run a course for us." Actually, I did not give them time in 2011. 2012, I ran a 21-hour course for them in this, where I brought in all these facts and said, not only about what happened in the past, what's happening today, what's likely to happen in the future, what is the lesson that 2008 economic crisis of the world has taught the West. And it is not that the West can reveal out of what it has done. They have destroyed their civilizational assets to build the financial assets. You can never rebuild families. You cannot, by a government order, say families should revive. It's not possible. Families exist by culture. They are rooted in tradition. Unless your economic system, your political system, your social thought learn to respect the sensitivities of tradition, culture, religion, respect for parents, elders. These are all things, which the Western civilization lost in the last 50, 60 years. There are reasons for that. you understand the difference between the West and us, you can never run a family business. If you have this confusion of the West haunting you, harassing you, making you feel inferior, you can never do family business in this country. It's on a different discipline, different culture, different orientation, different approach to life. And so after I ran the course, in IIT they are making it a permanent thing, and other IITs also want this kind of thing because they have absolutely no understanding of what is the Indian way. And what we were told in 1991, this is very important for us. 1991-92, because I had an occasion to travel across the country because I was very worried about the kind of economic philosophy which was being marketed at the time. Dr. Manmohan Singh brought Dr. Jagdish Bhagwati and sought an advice from him. You know, Dr. Jagdish Bhagwati is one of the finest economic minds in the world. And Paul Krugman, who got the Nobel Prize in 2008, acknowledged that Jagdish Bhagwati was his guru. And Jagdish Bhagwati gave a 72-page paper to the government of India, in which he said the biggest problem of India is the fact that the Indian people are saving more than what they need. The family savings is 19% of the GDP. It should be brought down to 9 to 10%, and the balance 9 to 10% should be released for consumption. Then it will go to increase sales, then it will go to increase production, then it will go to increase employment. And he worked back with the supply side economics and said that the Indians have to be forced to spend and cut the interest rates, and he gave one graphic example also as to how the Indian women are so stingy unless you change their habits. It's such a, in a macroeconomic advice, he's giving a micromanagement of how the family orientation must be. He said you must construct huge malls and get attractive goods from all over the world, jewelry and all kinds of gadgets and your textiles, and you must move the women out of their baggings and make them consumers, and once you do that, the economy will succeed. Can you believe this? This was on the website of the government of India till about 2 years ago. I think they were so ashamed of this advice, they removed it from the website. See what happened in India. At that time, the family savings was 18 to 19% of GDP. Today, it is 28 to 29%. At that time, the savings to GDP ratio was 22%. Today, it touched a high of 36% almost. And our biggest problem at that time was that India would manage only 24% of investment, and because of that, we are going only at 6%. You know the relationship between investment and growth. 1/4 of the investment is the growth rate. This is the capital output ratio. It is not that in India you add up the production. You want to find out what is the investment last year, that will be the growth this year. This is the normal. 25% of your investment translates into growth rates. And when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was Prime Minister, when I had occasion to deal with the government, and they used to take my advice, at least hear my advice, if not take my advice. And one of the points that used to be mentioned by our economic advisors is that we have only 24% investment, we have to increase to 34% investment. And we can't generate that kind of savings, and so we need foreign investment wherever it comes from. We don't see the color of money, we want money. And so we want 8% additional investment every year to promote the growth rate to 8%. You know, you should calculate. Of course, many people have done it. I need not have to tell you. You might have yourself read in newspapers, including Shankaracharya, who was the advisor to the government of India, that from 1991 to 2011, the total amount of foreign investment that came into India was only 1.2% of the total investment in this country. And our investment went up to as high as 38% in 2007-8. And what drove India? Now it is openly accepted, nobody even questions it. And that is the specialty of the Indian model, that without foreign investment, India had achieved a growth rate which was considered unachievable without foreign investment, and that is because of the family structure. It is the families which mounted this kind of savings, irrespective of interest rates. You know, in the year 2004, the interest rate of banks on a 3-year deposit was cut to as low as 5.5%. But in that year, you can find from statistics, the deposits rose, because to get the same amount of interest, you had to invest more, because the interest rates were lower. As a banker, there are people here sitting who will testify to you. The interest rates has never altered the deposits in this country. It may have altered the advances. And for this, the important factor is culture, the tradition, the responsibility a family undertakes. It's no economic unit, but it produces economic results. It's a cultural unit which produces economic results. And now a new orientation has been acquired by the West. After 2008 collapse, why did the world economy collapse? It is because the American families collapsed. It is because they had more borrowed. You know, in America, today, 66% of the American families own homes. And the amount of money they owe as debt on it is $10 trillion. And in the last 10 years, 15 years if you calculate, they have borrowed about $7 trillion. And the additional housing has been only for 3% population. Because the money that they borrowed, they only splurged it on consumption. It was not money to build new houses. It was money that's advanced on what was known as home equity. And that is what drove the American economy for 5 years from 2006 to 2007. And today the American families are 11 crore families, 112 million families. 112 million families have 1.2 billion credit cards on which they owe $2.5 trillion. And all this has completely knocked the bottom out of the American economy. You know that family balance sheet is weak, bank balance sheets are weak, government balance sheet is weak. Only the corporate balance sheets in America are strong, which is not true of Europe. All their balance sheets are weak except in the case of France and Germany. Because you civilizationally disturb the families, their savings, their responsibilities, man-woman relationship, parent-children relationship. With the result, a new culture was produced, and that culture produced economic development. I will give it to you. In 2001, in Europe there was a study which was made that the total number of Europeans living in one house was 2.82. It came down in 2000, this was in 1981. In 1995, this came down to 2.5. The result was they needed 10 million more houses. These 10 million more houses meant $3.5 trillion economic growth. And the economic analysis said, you know, you require 10 million more television, 10 million more refrigerator, 10 million more cars. This promoted economic development, but see the injury to environment. But still, they did not speak about the injury to culture. In America, the number of persons living in a family was 3.6 in 1946. This remained up till about 1950. Today it is 2.5. This has necessitated the building of 35 million more houses, and this produced a GDP of $7 trillion. So, you exhaust and erode and destroy your cultural assets and produce financial assets. And ultimately what happened? American savings has gone down, and Americans have been shifted from bank to stock market. Only 6% of the Americans were investing in stock market in the year 1981, and the rate of interest in America on deposits was 18%. And the interest rates were slashed to push the people into stock market. 55% of the American families were thrown into stock market. Today, the stock market of America and national economy are one and the same. This is not true of Japan. Only 9% of Japanese savings gets into stock market. This is not true of Germany. Only 7% of the German families invest in stock market. In fact, when German workers were given stock option, only 17% accepted stock options, 83% wanted cash option. Every economy the American culture. The Anglo-Saxon culture so dominates our mind, our language, our literature, our writing, our media. With the result, we have created a conflict, a daily running conflict between our movements and our methods. This is the broad conflict I found, distortion I found, inability to manage your affairs according to the factual situation of where you are. You have an imaginary world, you have an imaginary model, you have an imaginary system, and you feel inferior if you don't adopt to that system. And in India, I have gone to most of the IIMs. They have such a trivial opinion about family managed businesses, and they are going to get employed in family managed businesses. And you create a mindset in their mind that family managed businesses are inferior and the family successors are such idiots, they are there because of status. If this is the mindset with which you are going to be executives in the company, what kind of education system you are creating to align with 98.5% of the businesses in India are family businesses? And we have no understanding of what this country is. I asked many IIM people, IIT people, what is the share of corporates in India's GDP? You know, it is 14%. Just 14%. And what is the share of the listed companies in India? BSE 500 in our GDP? 5%. What is the share of Sensex companies in our GDP? 1%. The stock market has nothing to do with the Indian economy. 39% of the Indian GDP is contributed by unincorporated sector. Non-farming enterprises in India, 43.5 million enterprises, give 100 million employment. You know, if I tell you the contribution of this organized sector in our employment, you will be stunned how this country is running. You see, in the year 1991, the public sector undertakings contributed 19 million. This came down to 17.8 million in 2011. In 20 years, the public sector employment reduced by 1.2 million. In this period, the private sector employment, which was about 7.7 million, rose to 10.7 million. That is 3 million it increased. You know, in this period, the net rise in employment was 10% and the population growth was 43%. 84 crores to 120 crores. You know, 93% of the Indians are self-employed. There is no way you can employ India. You cannot convert India into a country of employers and employees. But we have no understanding now. How many of us know 87% Indians reside in their own houses? It may be art. Still he has a house. Most of us do not know our 7 lakh villages have only 12,800 police stations. Still our crime rate, I'll tell you, it is one of the lowest in the world. For example, the number of robberies in the world per 100,000 population. This is National Master Count. This is a completely verified affair. Robberies per 100,000 population, US 146. And it keeps on coming down. You know which is the last country? India with 1.6. Number of people in prison in America, 750 per 100,000 population. India 1.46. But you have a feeling it is an anarchic country. Because J.K. Galbraith, who came to India in 1960s, he described India as a functioning anarchy. And Karl Marx said this is a country, oh, it's a great civilization and it has a village economy where there is no difference between the producer and the consumer, it has the least amount of exploitation. But these fellows worship monkeys. These fellows worship cows. How can a civilization which worships cow and monkey can progress without revolution? So this society has to be destroyed and the British are doing a very fine job of destruction. though it is painful, it is a pleasurable destruction. This is what Karl Marx wrote in 1853 in New York Herald Tribune. And you know, the man never came to India, he never read any Indian literature, he never met any Indian, but he influenced India like nobody. And Max Weber, he went to America in the early part of the 20th century and he wrote a book which is fantastic and completely fitted in the Christendom. And he said that Protestant civilization, Protestant Christian ethics can alone build modern capitalism. And he was able to show examples as to how Catholic countries are lagging behind because of their overwhelming church, pressure, traditions. And he said that unless the Protestant revolution takes place in Catholic countries, they cannot develop. And Protestant Christian ethic is the foundation of modern capitalism. And I could understand because his experience was that the empirical study showed it. And that was good for the West. But after 20 years, the man wrote a book on India and China. And he said these two civilizations can never grow because they believe in karma and rebirth. He never knew that these two civilizations were leading the world for 1700 years because that was found out almost a century later. And we believed it. Our sociology was influenced by Max Weber, our politics was influenced by Karl Marx, and we were not influenced by any Indian thinker. And till today, our think tanks, our education system, our public discourse, and it is also fashionable to quote people who are. Max Weber never came to India. He never read in Indian literature. But he commented on India and we believed that comment. And it is in that light. Professor Rajkrishna said in 1978, what can we do? We can grow only like this because we are Hindus. We believe it. You know, McNamara, as IMF president, he quoted it saying that this civilization will always be expecting aid, and in the interest of India, we have to generate funds for aiding India. In the year 1998, Mantek Singh Ahluwalia quoted Robert McNamara to say Robert McNamara said this. Can we believe this intellectual slavery? You know, there is a huge conflict which is going on, intellectual conflict. Unless you resolve it, unless you face it with facts, unless you understand where our mind has got clogged, we can never do business with pride. You know, Ayuda Puja in factories. Have you ever seen that? How a relationship is established between the worker and the machine. You know, in 1978, when I had been to, I used to go to Delhi from 1976. In 1978, Ramnath Goenka, with whom I had a very special relationship, he asked me a question, Guru, what do you think of Delhi? I said, sir, I was surprised that people here stake the books and put their legs on it and sleep. And they put their legs on the typewriter and sleep. These are all things which you worship. Unless capital is changed, the country has no future. This is what I told him at the time. You know, culture builds a nation. Erosion of it destroys culture. The West is a destroyed society today. That's why they need police. They need law. They need courts. They need lawyers. They need agreements for marriage. You know the kind of social capital we have built. In India today, I have seen businessmen who give the word, no writing, nothing, even today. Hundreds of crores of transactions take place by word of mouth. Is it not a big asset? How much it reduces the transaction cost? If you study the comparative figures of the Japanese and the American economy between 1970 and 1990, it's available, it's all on the net. The biggest advantage Japan had was in transaction cost. America lagged behind in competition because of transaction cost. Because it is a relation-based society. It's not a contract-based society. There is a relationship between an individual and the family. The individual can never claim the rights which an American individual claims in this country. He has to trade off his rights with the family. He has to trade off his rights with the society. You know, people have come here from Coimbatore. In 2001, I had a discussion with, I can mention the name also, S.V. Balasubramanian, in whose balance sheet I found some 1,000 crores. I told him, sir, there are so many companies available here. Why don't you take over? He said, sir, Samudayatla Kettatadu. I will look at a bad name in the community. Then maybe you can take over. I put a provocative question to you. You can take over the companies belonging to other communities. No, sir. Between two communities there will be a problem. Where do you fit it into market economy? Tell me. But it exists, it's a fact. And you want to destroy it to produce a market economy? You are not producing a market economy, you are producing a market society. The society becomes a market, family becomes a market. So unless you understand the wider dimensions of the issue, there are more profound questions, difficult questions. And the family members must know it. They must know about our tradition, our culture, our situation, the drives of our economy. It's not what I am saying, the family drive the Indian economy is true. This year, the government of India will be borrowing 6.5 lakh crores for its survival. The Greek government is not able to do it. Spain is not able to do it. America is not able to do it. Why? Because Americans do not save that much. The Indian families will be depositing this year 8 lakh crores in banks. You know, in 1991, our bank deposit to GDP ratio was 34%. Today it is 69%. That's why the government is surviving. Families have saved this country. And you have done nothing to nurture the families. You have done things to destroy the families. You enact a law, Domestic Violence Act, and say this is the most progressive legislation. Husband and wife clash is always true in every society. You know, Sweden is number 8 in Human Development Index. 50% of the bureaucrats are women. 51% of the professionals are women. More than 50% of the parliamentarians are women. 47% of the municipal councillors are women. 67% of the men and women live together, anybody with any length of time. And the children born are the property of the state. You know the population of this country? Less than 9 billion. And you want to follow that country? It is not going to exist after 50 years. Because they have exhausted their civilizational assets. Man and woman will not live together. Like Americans are trying to give tax concessions to make husband and wife live together. That is the last thing for which a wife will live together with the husband. You must understand that something which is lost, something which is profound, something which has worked for thousands of years, that we have to factor into our DNA. It is in our DNA, but it's not in your intellectual discourse. It is not in your systems. I'll give you a small example. You know, Confucius, the Chinese thinker, he always kept telling the emperor, you are not important, only the family is important. Then the emperor asked, what do you mean? I want to take care of all of you, and how is it that I am not important? He said, you are not important. Then he said, I have to maintain law and order. You agree? You have to maintain law and order. Let's assume a son sees a father killing somebody. Should he not come and report to my police? He said, under no circumstances he should report. Then if I file a case and ask the son to testify in court, should he or should he not tell the truth? He should never tell the truth. He should tell a lie to protect his father. He said, Confucius, what are you saying? He said, I am saying this because the families will be outclassed in the empire. Without families, there is no human system. This is fundamental. Families go with culture, with tradition, with belief, with pride. And no family can exist without pride. Even a very small man. You must have seen that great program in television. In UP villages, they pasted in front of each house, this is a BPL family. They revolted and said, remove this. Who will give daughter-in-law to us if my family is advertised as a BPL family? This is not true of only TVS as pride. Murugappa has pride. Even a small man, in his place, he has pride. It is the pride about the family which makes a man not to do mistakes. Because family pride will be affected. That's why in villages, when the father comes drinking, the wife will go and bring him to the rear door and make him sleep so that the sons do not see, children do not see, others do not see. It's not that we prevented people from drinking. There was a discipline to drink. But what we have done in modernity, cocktail party. For which you feel shy, you transform the society into a shameless society. We can't. We have to think about all this. And unless we go into the root of these issues, it is difficult for a civilization like India. And it's going to play a very major role in the world. By 2035, India is recognized to become, whether India wants it or not, a global power. In fact, America has produced a research paper, I don't know how many of you have gone through it. They have said, dump Pakistan, go with India, because we cannot police the entire world, and India has the civilization, it has the resources, it has the power, it has the intellect, it has the tradition, and it has a non-conflicting tradition. And we have to partner India. Dump Pakistan, it will go to pieces. Let us not bother about it. This is the latest attitude of American thinking. But a carbon copy cannot become a global power. You have to think for yourself. And if this group, who deal with the world, we are the window of the world, the professionals, the businessmen, the lawyers, the chartered accountants. And if we don't understand the depth of this civilization, its history, and a family is a species of this huge civilization, and it has held on. In spite of all the assaults, it has held on. The Indian women sang the advertisement songs but never bought the goods, and that is how we could produce huge amount of savings. We are not somebody who underspent. Our savings to GDP ratio, if it is family level 29%, our consumption is 59%. The recommended consumption is 66%. America is consuming more, and China is consuming so less that it can't start to consume more because it will implode. It can't stop consuming more, otherwise it will collapse. That kind of problem is not there. We have a balanced attitude to savings and consumption. There is culture. There is a family influence. There is a society influence. These are all assets. This cannot be created by legislation. This cannot be created by government order. But it can be destroyed by legislation and government order. So we have to think, intellectuals who can think. This group should not think only for itself. It has a duty and responsibility to think for the society, the country. And we are heading to captain the world. We are going to be one of the 3 world powers by 2050. America, China and India. Politics will work out the details, relationships and all that, but we have to work out our own intellectual approach. We need our own thinking, our own model, our own HR, our own business model, our own thinking, our own way of succeeding. In the Indian Companies Act, there is not a single provision about resolving family disputes. Because there is no family in England. If I copy that law, you need a Companies Act in which families are integrated and everybody is a shareholder. They are not shareholders. There is a relationship between them. We are not shareholders of Reliance, unrelated to each other. We are related to each other. That's an asset as well as an obligation. It can become a problem. It can implode. how to solve this, and you are about to go and say, as if we are unrelated to each other, you hold a meeting directed by your coach. Nothing. 4 people are sitting there. You want the coach direction? See how foolish we are. That the ground reality is this, and your law has nothing to do with it, because if you pass that kind of law, you feel inferior. Because you are accepting family-based business. You want to destroy it. You can't destroy it. It's a larger issue. So I always, whenever, in my corporate advisory, one thing I found was, in a very big dispute, the elder brother kept on saying how foolish the younger brother is, he's an idiot, this, that, he knows nothing, and he listens to X, Y, his wife. I told him, don't you think your responsibility is more? You should have taken better care of him. You say he was so loyal to you, so nice to you, so obedient to you. The man sat, half an hour later he told me, do what it says. I failed in my duty. You can never get this out of an individualistic civilization. It is possible only in a family situation. However much problem you may have, I don't want my family prestige affected in public. You will suffer, you will cry, you will writhe in pain. This is relation-based society. There is a relationship which you can never ignore. All these implications have to be debated. And it has to be factored into. And whenever people used to come to me with a partnership deed or anything, I said, you are signing a deed to fight tomorrow. Your brothers are joining together to start. I said, you are joining together to fight tomorrow. Be careful. You create a practical mindset. I have seen this happen. In the year 1977, when a Marwadi family came to me, with fights between brothers, Madras-based family. And I said, can you find some elder in your community and go and talk to them? They came with a legal notice to be sent. I said, don't send a legal notice. Elder brother should never send a legal notice to their member. They were stunned. Because the lawyers have told them you have to send it. I said, don't do it. You go to the elders in the community. There is a Marwadi Panchayat system. They went and told. And in 45 days they resolved the dispute. And the rules of the dispute was they will never give their award in writing. Because cash, this, that, jewelry, everything is there. They will orally say, this belongs to you, this belongs to you, this belongs to you. You have to give this to you, you have to give this to you. People have to count down. And if one person doesn't honor, they will spread the word in the community, this man is not reliable. That's it. This is social capital. This is an asset. You should never lose it. And lawyers make it lose it. I know my own good friends. Ashok Desai, a senior counsel, used to tell me, Guru, you will see that we all become bankrupt because you are solving the dispute. Of course, in a right way. The first thing the lawyer does is send a legal notice. And the elder brother says, sir, my elder brother has sent a legal notice to me, sir. The wound becomes so deep, it is difficult to bring it to the state of reconciliation. So it's a very sensitive issue. And I came only to share my thoughts very plainly. We need to rethink, reposition ourselves. We need an intellectual re-engineering of the Indian businessmen. And I told one of the leading corporates, you appoint any person as your successor who doesn't bear your surname. You are undoing your doom. These are a method of looking at it. You may call it pluralistic, you may call it anything. This is a fact which you have abandoned. So I feel that we should handle facts ruthlessly, and we should not have imaginary understanding, and we should not think, if you talk this, people will think you are backward. Yes, you are backward. What's wrong with it? Are you producing result or not? That is the most important thing. Economic result is ultimately the delivery point for the world. When India exploded the Kran atom bomb, The economic managers of India said this country has destroyed our economy. This is the last point I am making, how important it is to have national pride. You know, Tarasena, one of the very well-known advertisement executives, she wrote an article in 2001 in Economic Times where she had captured this. She said she was a woman brought up in tradition, so she never used to stay in hotels in the course of her travel across the world. And she always used to stay with some family, friends. She said for 20 years, I have only heard Indians abusing India as a dirty country, rotten country. See the traffic, see the temple, see this, see the... She said, I never used to sleep. But amazingly, all this changed on one day, the day on which the Pokhran atom bomb was exploded. India remained the same. Their minds changed. They began celebrating it because India became a power. We must internalize the cultural power of India. You know, Joseph Naik, who wrote in 1981, America is seen as a rowdy, a hard power. It has a lot of soft power. Howard, Stanford, Mickey Mouse, Coca-Cola. This is the soft power of America. Where are you always projecting the mighty military power? So America must change its course. Forget Vietnam. We must go on soft power. You know, this decided the entire diplomatic thrust of America. And Joseph Nye wrote in the year 2001, India is the greatest emerging soft power in the world. Your culture, your tradition, your non-conflicting way of approaching the world, you have no problem with gods, you have 33 crore gods, you can worship any number of gods, you have more gods than human beings. In 1920, our population of gods was more than the population of human beings. And I want you to read one paper by an IMD professor, Jean-Pierre Levin, on monotheistic religions and Hinduism, where he said quite clearly, the greatest contribution of India is that it has taught its people how to worship thousands of gods. So they have no conflict with God. And it is only this attitude which is going to enable globalization to work. Otherwise, globalization will be unworkable unless the approach of accepting all gods, all faiths, all traditions, all cultures, all way of worship, all ways of eating, all culinary art becomes the norm of the world. Only we can deliver it. We have a responsibility, and this group must begin thinking in depth. It should not have a superficial discussion. And I'm extremely happy I got this opportunity to share my thoughts with you.